All right. We are going to talk about drawing cylindrical objects today. So a cylinder is the thing that you see in the foreground, that white object. You can see I have two bottles here. Those are also cylindrical. So the principles of drawing the cylinder are the same as the drawing of the bottles that we're going to make right now. Okay. We're going to talk about the line of gravity. We're going to talk about proportion. We're going to talk about scale, all those things. Okay. You would be surprised how often what we do right now with this basic geometric form, how that relates to drawing later. Cezanne said that if you can draw a cylinder, a cube, and a cone, you can draw anything, and it's probably true. Okay. So the main thing about this drawing that you're going to need to understand is about comparative measurement. All right. So we're going to draw one of these tequila bottles. In our prop room, we have about a dozen tequila bottles, which I think is odd. Okay, I think it probably shows that somebody here has an issue. But anyway, we are going to pick one of these bottles, and we're going to try to draw it on our paper as large as we can make it. Okay, so the scale is going to be bigger, perhaps, if I'm drawing the smaller bottle. Than it actually is in real life. So the scale changes, but the proportion doesn't change. The proportion is the ratio of the width to the height, and that's going to be an important thing for you to understand. I would reckon that both of those tequila bottles hold the same amount, okay? But one is tall and skinny, one is short and fat, all right? So I drew the tall and skinny one the other day, so I'm going to draw a short and fat one today, okay? Now when I'm drawing a cylindrical object, the thing I need to remember is that this thing is standing straight up and down. Okay, that means it's perpendicular to the surface plane. So I would want to hold up my stick to see the plumb line, to see that it is in fact symmetrical. All these objects are symmetrical on both sides of that plumb line. The plumb line is the line of gravity. It's the true vertical. A plumb line is used in construction. It's been used since the beginning of time, or at least as long as we've been building things. So it's mentioned it was used to build the pyramids. It's mentioned in the Old Testament and the New Testament of the Bible. So if it's in there, it's good enough for you, okay? So what we're going to do, start off, we're going to make that plumb line straight, vertical line. This vertical line, which I'm drawing relatively lightly, even though I'm using a 4B pencil, which you don't have to, you could use a 2B pencil. This line has got to be parallel to the sides of the paper, okay? And then I'm going to start by drawing the top ellipse. So this is an ellipse. This is the ellipse shape. And I made reference to this the other day, but we're going to clarify that right now. So an ellipse, to draw an ellipse, you have to do what I'm doing. You have to feel the ellipse as you're drawing. This allows you can see I started off smaller and then I expanded, okay? It's the only way you can draw an ellipse. You can't draw an ellipse using the point of your pencil. Okay? When you're using the point of your pencil, you end up with something that looks really odd. Okay? Something like that. And this ellipse is bad because it's a pointy ellipse. Okay? We don't want that. Notice I have curves on the ends of my ellipse here. Okay? So starting off with that ellipse, and then coming straight down for the neck of the bottle. And I'm thinking that I want to make this ellipse even bigger because I want the bottle to be bigger. So I'm going to expand that. And I can do that because I drew lightly to start with. If I drew like that, it wouldn't be light enough for me to improve it. There's a thickness to this top ellipse. I'm going to put that in there. And then the sides of the bottle coming down here. Shoulders of the bottle. Bottom of the bottle. Now, when drawing a cylinder, there's some things you're going to have to remember. So I'll draw that white cylinder right now. Starting with the top ellipse. I should have started with the plumb line, right? You're right. So starting with the plumb line, and then drawing the top ellipse, and then coming straight down. and then drawing the bottom ellipse. Now, let's pretend that that cylinder, that white cylinder, is see-through, okay? So I would draw, if it's see-through, I would be seeing the whole bottom ellipse like this. Notice this, that this top ellipse right here, which is closer to my eye level, I see less of that than I do of this bottom one, okay? It's the bottom ellipse that's further from my eye level is larger at its vertical axis, this being the vertical axis, than the one closer to the eye level. That's really important. I can't tell you how many times students draw a cylinder like this. So they get the top ellipse, and then they come straight down, and then they make a flat bottom, okay? Because it's sitting on a flat surface plane, I guess, that makes sense, but this is actually more curved, not less curved, the further you get away. So now, I don't know for sure that this tequila bottle that I drew is in proportion. Now remember, we talked about proportion, the size of one thing in relation to something else. The scale is obviously larger than the bottle that I'm looking at. If I held that bottle up next to it, it would be a lot bigger. But the proportion, I think, is fairly accurate, but there's one way to find out, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure at the widest point of the object, all right? So I'm going to measure at the widest point of the object. And what I'm doing when I do this is I'm holding my stick so that the point is on one end and my thumb is on the other end. So this is kind of what I'm seeing when I'm looking at that. I'm getting a unit of measurement, all right? And then I want to use that unit of measurement to see how tall this is. So we're talking about the height in relation to the width. So as I do that, I see, and I'm taking my stick and I'm turning it so that the top of the stick is here, and then I have my unit of measurement here, okay? When I do that, I see that the bottle, this short, fat bottle, is actually 1 unit, and maybe, well, it's less, it's a little bit more than a half, so a unit and a half, a unit and maybe 2/3, okay, is how long the bottle is, okay? So that proportion, that doesn't change with the scale. And it looks like, yeah, I could make this maybe a little bit shorter, but it is fairly close, okay? So once I have my basic size, all right, so the scale and the proportion, and I feel like the proportion's accurate, then I go to detail, okay? So I'm going to tighten up now in the drawing that I've started with. There are a couple other things I can check, by the way. I can check to see how long this is in relation to the unit this way. So we should probably do that just to make sure. And that, I would say, is a little bit less than half a unit. And so here's a whole unit, a half unit, so maybe a little bit less. So maybe I can shorten this a little bit. So put it about here. Now you can see I'm drawing light to start. That's important. It can always get darker. So now as I tighten up on the drawing, I'm changing the grip of my pencil. This is actually thinner at the top than what I drew originally. Opening is really small. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to hold off on doing anything like the bands or the labels or anything like that. Notice how I'm holding the pencil further back. Also notice as I start to darken these lines, they become the ones that are obvious. The other ones just give you a little bit of animation, I reckon. Don't be afraid to rotate the drawing board if you need to help facilitate drawing the curves. Okay, so now I have my bottle. I can't really see too much of that, even though the glass is really thick, so I can't really see the inside of it too well. But there is a thickness right in here of the glass at the base. Okay. So there's a cylinder, and you can see that it didn't take that long, a cylindrical object. It didn't take that long to draw that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the form, the actual form of this object, and giving you the illusion of form more than what we have right now. Okay, so the illusion of form is when we think about how we've done that in drawings previous, it was based on value, right? And we're not going to have value here. We're only going to have line. So the lines that we're going to use are called cross contours. Okay. And cross contours are important because they establish the direction of the form. And normally when you're shading a drawing, you are going to be following the direction of the form. Okay. So looking at the tops of those two tequila bottles, one of them, the blue one, is flatter at the top. This one actually angles inward, and the only way I know that is because before we started filming, I went and touched it, okay? So what that means is I'm coming down and angling inward, okay? So it's doing this as it comes inside. So there's a cross contour and there's a cross contour. And now here's a cross contour coming inside. And this angle now, this curve, becomes less, okay, as it gets closer to the plumb line. And then, again, because I went and touched it earlier, it drops straight inside the bottle, okay, like that. Now I'm going to have cross contours on this side coming in, coming in. Then they go down that straight part, and then they come inside. Then they start to curve around the form. This curve is less than that curve because it's closer to the center, remember. And then it bends around the bottom part of that bottle. So on this side, comes straight down, goes in, curves around. Notice also I'm making sort of longer strokes, okay? As we get to the center, straightens out a little bit, not quite that much. And then down like that, and then the distance between here and here becomes slightly less, and you're going to see that the angle becomes less for the curve. You just want enough cross contours to establish form. You don't need millions of them. So right now, these aren't really cross contours because they're only going one direction. They don't become cross contours until you have lines that are going to cross the original lines we just drew that are going to cross the form. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to come around, and we have to look at the curve of the ellipse that we drew at the top, right? And make sure that we're just getting it slightly more curved than that one is, not less curved. And this one becomes more curved than the one I just drew. And this one more than that one. And then we already have one kind of here. And that's kind of enough to establish the form. The other thing you can do if you want to get really fancy, you want to be more advanced, is weighting the line. So we talked about line quality when we were doing the contour drawing. And line quality means, as you all know, the character of the line. We also have line weight. So right now the line weight is relatively uniform, but if we want, we can start to make it push harder as the form is turning away, as it bends down. Ease up, and then every time the form starts to change direction, then it can get a little bit darker. So that would be giving you variation of the line weight. Okay? So now we have a cylindrical object in proportion on the paper, scale larger than the actual object, scale, different proportion, the ratio of the height to the width, the same, okay? I'm going to write down again the terminology we use because it was kind of important. So this kind of object, this object, this object, these are called cylinders. Oh, I broke my pencil. So this overall shape is a cylinder, and this shape here, this is an ellipse. The center line that we drew for the line of symmetry, that is called a plumb line. And we were doing comparative measurement, and when we were measuring the height and comparing it to the width, what we're doing really when we're using this stick, and you see me checking the proportion. By the way, this is the thing that whenever you see a cartoon and you see an artist and the artist is painting and he's doing this with his thumb, that's what they're doing. They're checking for proportion. The thumb thing is not really accurate. The stick, and this is a bamboo skewer that I'm using, is good. You can use your pencil for this if you don't have a stick, but the problem is with the pencil it's fatter and you're actually drawing with it. This allows you to observe the plumb line and measure while you're actually drawing. So the height to the width, that ratio, that is, we're talking about proportion. Did I write this down already? Nope. And the actual using of the stick, that is called sighting, okay? So we are sighting. We are doing comparative measurement with the stick, okay? So now we have the cylinder. Looking at my curve here, I think my curve needs to be a little bit more curved there. So we have the cylinder, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a piece of fruit, an apple, with cross contours, and you'll see how what we just did relates to that, okay? Okay, so that's cylinder.